lot of research around brain aging, and certainly a lot of supplements have come to market boasting about improving your brain health. Well, today we're going to talk about a plant called cat's claw. It is a plant that has been studied and the subject of a recent research report by Dr. Alan Snow. Alan has spent decades studying brain aging and Alzheimer's disease, and he joins us today to talk about this report. Hi, Alan.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Alan, I want to start with the very basics. What is cat's claw? It has a strange name. You think of an animal, but it's actually a plant. So tell us, what is it?
So cat's claw, in fact, I didn't know what it was either in the beginning. I thought it was like the claw of a cat, but it actually turns out to be a woody vine that grows in the Amazon rainforest, and it grows to about 100 feet in length. And they actually cut the vine, and it's been used for over 2,000 years by the Peruvian tribes, where they actually used to make a tea, and it used to show benefit for the immune system. So that's how it all came about and has been used for many years.
Now, you've studied, though, there's many different types of cat's claw, is that right? And your study pertains to one in particular.
Yes, the one that we looked at very carefully, and it's just because we found that it had potent effects against brain plaques originally. There are actually about 34 different species of the genus called Uncaria, and the one that we looked at is called Uncaria tomentosa. So that's the one that we studied, and then we did a lot of research for about 10 years, really looking at what's in it, what it does, and we had some amazing and surprising discoveries that came out of this research.
Okay, I want to talk about the research, but first, I really want to understand how you were actually able, there's so many plants in this world, right? How were you actually able to isolate this one in particular?
So actually, it was quite by accident how we came across this discovery. I was actually 20 years ago very involved in carbohydrate research in the brain. And we actually went into a vitamin store in Seattle, Washington, pulled out a lot of different dietary supplements that people were taking. And I was actually looking to see if there was a carbohydrate that had an effect on reducing and inhibiting the amyloid plaques that accumulate in your brain as you age. And what we found is that we made a particular assay in which we put basically like a fishing hook on a column, and then we poured through a stream of ingredients, which were all these different dietary supplements. And what we're looking for is there's something that binds to the column that actually be binding to the beta amyloid protein that's found in brain plaques. And then we found one that was really binding very well, and it was the cat's claw ingredient. So we started looking more and more into this. That's how it all started. It was quite by accident.
Tell us, though, what happens when your brain ages? What is it? How do we reduce aging in our brain?
So what happens to your brain as you age is in your 20s, late 20s, early 30s, you start to accumulate what's called plaques. Plaques are made out of a protein called beta amyloid that a lot of people have been talking about as far as brain aging is concerned. So the plaques look like Swedish meatballs in your brain. Basically, they start accumulating in between neurons or nerve cells, and they sort of block the way connections are made in order to remember a thought. And then later on, you have tangles that comes after, and those are like dried up spaghetti that would be inside a neuron and actually kills the neuron. So as you're aging, you're getting more and more plaques and tangles, and that's probably not a great thing for the aging brain, because if you eventually get the third part, which is inflammation in the brain, then you could actually get dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
So does everybody, as we age, do we all have plaque in our brain?
And the answer to that is yes. I would say 98, 99% of the people as they age accumulate plaques and tangles in the brain, probably starting in their 20s. And so if you could find something that could sort of retard it, inhibit it from forming, and once it's there, try and get it cleared out, that would help with memory loss. There's been a lot of papers where they show clearly that as the plaques and tangles accumulate, the memory loss increases. And so you are losing connections between different parts of your brain to remember a thought.
So when you are studying like the efficacy of something like cat's claw, what goes into determining how effective it is?
Oh, as shown in this paper, we've gone through a lot of different studies, probably 5 to 6 different what they call in vitro studies, that is looking at how it can inhibit the beta amyloid from forming fibrils, which are called plaques. And then once it's formed, can you dissolve it or disrupt it? So we use very sophisticated screening technologies, different types of assays. And in the end, we actually used animal models in which these mice, when they grow older, they start accumulating plaques in their brain and they start having memory loss. And you could actually quantitate the memory loss in these animals. And that's some of the studies that we did in this paper.
And we have a question coming in from a viewer right now who's asked, related to brain aging, can you tell us what age plaques and tangles start to accumulate in the brain?
I would even say in your late teens to early 20s. So anywhere from 15 to 20, 20 to 25, that's when they already start. Beta amyloid starts accumulating inside the neuron, and then it goes outside the neuron. And if it starts sticking to each other, it starts forming like a snowball. And the snowball is basically called the plaque. And so you have a bunch of snowballs in different regions of your brain. If you actually look under a microscope, you're going to see a lot of these sort of Swedish-looking meatballs. And they're basically there blocking the connections between your nerve cells to remember thoughts, especially if it's in the hippocampus, which is where the memory center is of your brain.
So I have to admit I've been a little bit confused myself because I've also been told that beta amyloid has a protective reason in our brains. So is it a matter of keeping the balance, or is what role does beta amyloid serve aside from just plaques multiplying in our brains?
Yeah, so beta amyloid, it's a controversial topic about whether it's protective or actually really not that good for you. I'm sort of on the belief it's not great for you to have lots and lots of accumulation of plaques as you age. Even if it has some sort of protective effect, what happens later on is it just gets out of hand. And the diagnosis in the end of Alzheimer's disease is due to the presence of both plaques and tangles. I mean, that's part of the pathology that you actually see. But on the other hand, I just want to point this out. There are a lot of people who live to over 100 years old who have a lot of plaques and tangles in their brain, but they never get Alzheimer's disease and they don't have memory loss. So what was found is that what they're missing is the neural inflammation part, which is really needed as the third part of what would get you to Alzheimer's disease. So my personal feeling is that the accumulation of lots of plaques and tangles in your brain is not very good for you. In fact, there's been studies on sleep deprivation. So if you sleep better, you could clear out the plaques in your brain pretty much every night. But if you're lacking sleep, those type of tendencies start to accumulate the plaques in your brain, and it's contributing to all kinds of things, including memory loss. So I don't think it's a good thing to have lots of this stuff in your brain as you age.
Okay, well, you're talking to someone who's chronically a bad sleeper, making me a
Me
little bit
too.
nervous
Yeah.
here. So let's get to the study and the research. I know you put over a decade behind this research of cat's claw in mice studies. So tell us exactly what you found. What did you see?
So first of all, we didn't know anything would be such a potent inhibitor of both plaques and tangles. Drug companies have been looking to go after this target for a long time and are still doing so. We found it in a natural plant extract. That's the first thing that's amazing. Second thing is that it's working both on plaques and tangles from both ends. And when I say both ends, it stops its formation. And once it's formed, it actually can cause its dissolving and dissolution. And what we found also is that as soon as the cat's claw hits the plaque, it dissolves it almost instantly, within a few minutes. And we showed that in the first couple of figures in our paper. So we're very excited that we identified that it is cat's claw. The next question was, what's in the cat's claw that's actually doing this? And we spent about a year or two working with a group out in New Zealand that was very good in plant biochemistry. So to find things in plants is very difficult because they tend to stick together and they're hard to isolate. So we used a bunch of very sophisticated structure elucidation studies with all kinds of spectroscopy. And in fact, in this paper, about 80 pages of the paper is how we elucidated, how we identified what's in the cat's claw that was working. And lo and behold, what we started finding is that certain what's called polyphenols were actually in cat's claw, including epicatechin, which is found in green tea, in all kinds of teas, major component. And then we started finding these epicatechins that actually stuck together, and they're called epicatechin dimers. Another word for them is proanthocyanidins. So these were newly discovered ingredients in cat's claw that no one else has found before. And it also we started deciphering the mechanism of not only what it is, but how it works. So part of the paper is also the mechanism of action, which I think
And
is a big find.
so how does it work exactly?
So what we found, first of all, was very important and a surprise is that these cat's claw polyphenols get into the brain within 2 minutes. And that was a surprising result. I sort of had an idea in the Alzheimer's field when I used to look at posters of green tea, because people in the beginning thought, well, this stuff never gets into the brain. And maybe it does. And then I started seeing posters, it could be, but they weren't sure. So we did a definitive study with Abacastin out of Tulane University and his group. They're a blood-brain barrier laboratory, so they look at how fast things get into the brain. And we found that within 2 minutes, the ingredients were getting into the brain. So the second part of it, once it's in the brain, it hits plaques or tangles, and it could cause their complete dissolution. And what happens is both a plaque or a tangle is in a structure called the beta sheet. So it looks like, if you look at my hands here, they're very, interconnected. The polyphenols in the cat's claw actually are very small, and they actually fit right in between the zipper. So if you think of something in a zipper formation, it serves as a wedge and it starts breaking it apart and the whole thing falls apart. And we can actually see that. We measured it 2 different ways. One is called circular dichrosin spectroscopy, where we show that the cat's claw can actually make the amyloid or the tau fibrils fall apart. And you could actually see that. And then under an electron microscope where you could visualize this all the way down to 30 to 50,000 magnification, you could actually see the fibrils turn into basically nothing. So as soon as the cat's claw was hitting it, it was basically dissolving the plaques and tangles. Now, I've never seen anything like this before, and I've done 30 years of drug development. So to see this in a natural product and understand the mechanism of how it's working is really a big breakthrough.
Okay, and we're getting a lot of questions in right now, so I want to address some of them from our viewers. One person is asking, is this the first time someone has deciphered how polyphenols improve brain health?
This is, I think, a landmark paper. 10 years of work from 8 different institutions, really understanding the mechanism of how the polyphenols are actually working to go after plaques and tangles in the brain and how they make them fall apart. There's always been, over the years, as we were doing this research, we kept on reading about resveratrol and curcumin and green tea, and all that was going on. But we started looking at the actual chemistry, the structures of the different types of polyphenols. And what we noticed here in the cat's claw is that the chemical structure and the spacing to actually get into a wedge to go and make the plaques and tangles fall apart, that was completely a new discovery. And it also deciphered basically like a Rubik's Cube of what was going on and how it's working. So I think this is the first time, and I believe this paper will be looked at for a long time, and people are just trying to digest it. It just came out on February 6th. So a lot of people are looking at this, and I think it's going to be a very landmark paper, understanding the whole thing from start to finish.
So we have another question, which is completely relevant from a viewer saying, how do we add cat's claw to our diet?
Well, it's funny you said that. So we actually have worked to make a dietary supplement with a specific cat's claw known as PTI-00703 cat's claw. So cat's claws are not all the same. And in fact, we've tested in our laboratories 18 different commercial cat's claws. And the question was, what's the activity against plaques directly? Is there a difference? And we found there is. In fact, the PTI-00703 cat's claw that we actually picked on purpose from 18 other companies has more efficacy, is more powerful at attacking the plaques, anywhere from 25% to 75% better than other cat's claws on the market. And what it has to do is where we're getting it from. They're actually going into the Amazon rainforest to get this particular type. And then the way we extract it, which is proprietary. The way we extract it is we actually optimize it so it had the best activity in making plaques and tangles fall apart. So this particular cat's claw ingredient is exclusively in a dietary supplement now called Percepta. And Percepta has only 2 ingredients in it, the PTI-00703 cat's claw, which is the basis of this paper, and a specific oolong tea extract as well. And we've done a lot of research on that ingredient as well. And it turns out to have potent polyphenols that are also targeting brain plaques and tangles.
So when you talk about going into the Amazon and getting this plant, tell me a little bit about that process. I mean, how did you know what type of cat's claw to get, and how did you source it in the Amazon?
So we didn't know what type of plant to get because we were testing from different companies all over the world. There are different manufacturers in Europe, Peru, the United States, and we were just testing different ones to look for which had the best activity. The best activity turned out to be the actual cat's claw that grows in the Amazon about a mile or 2 into the Amazon. So there is a company that's exclusive making the PTI-00703 cat's claw for us. We're the exclusive recipient of this type of cat's claw, which is in Percepta, in our Percepta products. And that's how it was done. One important thing to note is that you cut the woody vine, which is about 100 feet long. You take the bark from that. And by the way, here's a little visual. So this is like the actual bark that comes out of the cat's claw plant. And it looks like shaved bark, right? And eventually we turn it into a powder. So it's this type of sort of dark red powder. And this is the actual PTI-00703 cat's claw. that was based on all the studies that we did in this paper. So the woody vine will actually grow back, so we're not pillaging the rainforest. You cut the vine and it actually starts regrowing, and within 6 months to a year, it's actually regrowing again. So you can harvest it over and over again to get, this important plant.
That's really interesting. It's interesting to see it too. We have another question coming in saying, most of your studies in your newly released paper are in mice. Isn't the human brain more complicated? How do you know your plant abstract transfers to humans? Good question.
Very good question. There are some studies already out there, and I have this in my discussion of the paper. In one study, which they had cat's claw, I would say an inferior type of cat's claw, but yet it was still cat's claw. And in 45 days, it improved memory in normal individuals, both short-term memory, focus, and concentration. There's been a couple other studies where they actually had cat's claw in a mixture, and they looked at it in people who had dementia and actually Alzheimer's disease, and there seemed to be improvement in those studies as well. But further studies need to be done. We talk about that in our discussion in our paper. We are looking to do a double-blind, placebo-controlled study on the effects of Percepta, which is the PTI-00703 cat's claw plus oolong tea extract, in age-associated memory impairment in the next year. So we're actually setting up right now to do a human trial. But there is evidence out there in other clinical trials where cat's claw has been used that it is improving memory, and it does seem to correlate very well with what the animal studies were showing.
Okay, and we have a question that's coming in, and I think this raises a good point, saying, what other health tips should I consider in either combating or helping my loved one who suffers from dementia? This raises a good point. This is really only tested for brain health and aging. Is that right?
That's right. This dietary supplement is not intended to treat any disease. What we're doing with it is like taking a vitamin for the aging brain. So you want to start taking something very early in your life as you're aging to try to inhibit the formation of plaques and tangles. Or if you happen to have plaques and tangles in your brain, we want to cause a clearance and reduction of them. Further work needs to be done in types of drug trials with either a single ingredient that we found in the 703 cat's claw. And we're looking to do that in the future as well. But again, this is not intended to treat any disease. Percepta is targeting brain plaques and tangles in the normal aging brain.
Well, and they always say the brain acts like a muscle, but you want to take care of it early on, right?
Early on.
You want to keep it healthy.
Absolutely. 20 to 30 years before any symptoms of memory loss will occur is when you should be taking this. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be taking this dietary supplement later on in life, as we think you could cause some reduction of the plaques and tangles in your brain already.
Okay, and someone else is asking where they can find cat's claw. How can they get Percepta?
Percepta is sold right now on Amazon in the United States, and it's also sold on our website, perceptabrain.com. So that's where you can get it, and it's available now. And that's the only product that contains exclusively the PTI-00703, the cat's claw that we studied in this 100+ page paper report.
Okay, and someone else just asked, do you take it yourself?
I actually do. Yes, I do. And I've been taking it for about 8 months. And I do find my own personal experience is that within a few weeks, I noticed that the focus, concentration, memory has improved quite a bit, especially when you're multitasking and trying to focus to do one thing. I find that there's a very subtle difference. And I know people who have written reports and reviews on Amazon, and once they go off it, they actually really notice the difference, and then they end up going back on it. So I have noticed a difference myself.
Okay, and so another question from a viewer who asks, what studies have been done to suggest that the concentration of cat's claw in Percepta is sufficient to make significant changes in the human brain?
So we've done a lot of extrapolation pharmacokinetics of taking the animal data and the dosing that we use to figure out what's the approximate dose that should be used in humans. In the Percepta dietary supplement, we have about 350 milligrams of the cat's claw that is going in on a daily level, and that was the extrapolated dose from animals, in which we showed in 3 months there was about a 58% reduction in plaque load in those animals, with about a 57 to 8% improvement in short-term memory. So I think the dose is actually right on. And the reason I say that, because the testimonials and reviews coming from using Percepta are talking about memory improvement.
Okay, and this is another really good question. Like we talked about, really taking care of your brain at an early age. Another viewer just asked, would you give it to children?
It's a good question. My particular philosophy, we haven't studied this at all. So I would be hesitant of giving it to children because I think their brain is still developing. So if I had to choose a cutoff age, I would say 13 and below, I wouldn't do it. Starting in the teenagers, 14, 15, 16, 17, they studying for exams and things as high school and college becomes more important to retrieve information, right? Short-term memory, and basically regurgitate a lot of things that you're taught and give it back. I think it may be very useful at that age, but I wouldn't recommend it for anybody under 13, basically, because we haven't done the studies, and I don't want to push something that we haven't done the studies. Cognitive Clarity, this company that I formed with Rudy Tanzi, who actually discovered the Alzheimer's genes, our science is top notch, and we are not going to push anything that we haven't really studied. Our science is leading this company first.
What about in athletes, Ellen? I have a son who plays rugby. Would this be beneficial to athletes, especially, high contact sports?
Yeah, I think it would, and we actually have a product which is a variation of this called Percepta Sport. And the reason we brought this out is because athletes, can get tangles in the brain after playing sports or getting hit or something like that. And so we have actually a certified form. In other words, it was certified by NSF International, which looks for banned substances. So we actually have professional athletes that are actually taking a version of this called Percepta Sport. And that's on the marketplace as well, and can be bought on Amazon and our website as well. And this just came out a few months ago.
Okay, well, Ellen, thank you so much for your research. I mean, I know there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace about what really works and what doesn't. It's really great to see that there's been so much research associated with cat's claw 703, the one that you are studying. And we look forward to hearing about more in the future as your research progresses. But thank you so much for sharing this with us today. And people, as you mentioned, if they're interested in Percepta, it's available on Amazon, and more literature on it, or specifically on your report on cat's claw, the scientific research behind it, will be posted on demand in this link to the interview. So thank you so much, Ellen, for sharing with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot.